That's exactly where I want to start with you. Your assessment of what we're seeing play out in Iran and the Middle East right now and how it ripples to places like Russia.
Well, so the really big economic part of this story is the Strait of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz is a body of water where about 20% of all world's oil goes through, leaving the Middle East for end markets. The Iranians have basically shut down the Strait of Hormuz. And if they can continue to keep it shut down, then we have a big problem around the world. The price of oil goes up. And one of the biggest beneficiaries of this big problem is Russia, because Russia doesn't have to go through the Strait of Hormuz. They've been sort of in the penalty box. A lot of people aren't buying Russian oil because of sanctions. But because of this now huge dislocation, Russia's sitting in a very strong position. And the price that Russia gets for its oil has gone up dramatically. And so I think this is really, if this carries on, if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed, Putin is one of the big winners out of this whole thing.
Yeah, and Putin just yesterday floated the idea that potentially he would halt gas supplies to Europe ahead of Europe's own plans to do so and start rediverting some of that traffic to other places, for example, India and other parts of Asia. How quickly could we see that happen? And what does that mean for Europe if it happens?
Well, so what we've seen in Europe is the price of natural gas going up dramatically because of this, because the liquefied natural gas flows have been disrupted. And that could be a really big problem for Europe as far as inflation numbers. I mean, it's a problem for everywhere in the world when oil prices go up and natural gas prices go up. Putin understands and the Iranians understand that we can only stomach 1/100th the pain that he can stomach. And so all of a sudden we add 1 point of inflation to our numbers and we're all, squealing for some type of resolution very quickly. And that's what these bad guys are banking on. That's what the Iranians are banking on, and that's what Putin is banking on. And the big superpower that both of these Iranians and Russians have is that they don't care how many casualties their own soldiers experience. They don't care the types of things that we care about. If we lose one human life, we care about it. They don't care if they lose 100,000 human lives. And so they're even though they're not strong countries, both of them are isolated. They're both sanctioned. They're both weak. They have this one power, which is that they can send their own people into death, and it doesn't matter. And as a result of that, we have these situations where the Strait of Hormuz gets shut down, and the Ukrainians are suffering, and so on and so forth. And that is what we have to deal with.
There's been some talk out there by analysts that there's an informal non-attack pact with Israel, with Russia here. So in light of that, assuming it is actually the case, is it surprising that Russia has not come to the aid of Iran in a more meaningful way?
Well, so I mean, Russia it's a very complicated story. So on one hand, Russia is an ally of Iran, as it was with Venezuela. On the other hand, Putin has been given this great gift, which is that ever since President Trump came into office, he's no longer against Russia. He's sort of, to be the most charitable, he's playing it down the middle, sort of not taking sides. To be less charitable, he's kind of taken the side of Putin in a lot of international discussions about Ukraine. In any event, what Putin doesn't want to do is upset Trump. And so whatever the value of his alliance is with Iran, it's less valuable than having Trump either on his side or not against him. And so he's going to carry on not helping Iran as long as it keeps Trump on his side.
Interesting. Do you think peace talks between Russia and Ukraine continue then?
Well, I don't believe that these peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are real peace talks. I think that the main purpose of these talks is for Putin to kick the ball into the long grass. He wants to delay. He thinks he's winning the war in Ukraine because we're all sort of getting tired of the war. The United States has stopped funding the war. He's hoping that Europe will have some elections in France or Germany where far-right parties will come in and stop Europe funding the war. And all he has to do is just keep on putting soldiers into the meat grinder, which he doesn't care about, buy time and hope that the coalition of the willing collapses. And if Ukraine doesn't get money from Europe after losing the money from America, then he might be able to actually win the war. And that's what he's banking on. And so there is no peace talks. He's not intending on providing any peace. this is all just an illusion to buy time.
There's a lot of focus on munition stockpiles here in the U.S. and among our allies, given the role that drone warfare is playing right now in real time in Iran. Iran has obviously made some very sophisticated low-cost drones, the Shahed drones, which they were supplying to Russia as well for that war. Just yesterday, Ukraine's Zelensky announced that he's going to send some of his experts to the region to help counter some of this drone activity that we're seeing out of Iran. Just in terms of assessing those dynamics and what it means for weapons stockpiles and the flow of those supplies between these different conflicts.
Well, so we have this asymmetry where a $20,000 drone basically has to be shot down by a $4 million Patriot missile, and there's just not that many Patriot missiles and not that many other means of shooting down these drones. And so this is, again, another sort of part of modern warfare, which is how do you deal with this? And the Ukrainians, they were using the Patriot missiles that were being supplied to them by America and Europe, and they've run out of those missiles. And so they had to figure out, what do you do to stop these drones? And they figured out how to stop the drones. And now all of a sudden, the Ukrainians are the ones, people are asking Ukraine for military help instead of the other way around. And so we're in a new world when it comes to fighting wars, and the new world is all these types of very inexpensive drones and the measures you have to stop them. And Ukraine is probably the most technologically advanced when it comes to doing this, because they're being bombarded day in, day out by these drones and have to, necessity is the mother of invention. They've had to figure out how to stop it. And they haven't been 100% successful, but they've been a lot more successful than anyone else with a lot less resources.